In our first video, we introduced the concept that sex is never about sex. And what we talked about is the idea that when we think about sexuality and sex in our own personal lives and for those that we're leading, we've got to understand it's not just a biological, physical issue, but what's happening is we are spiritual beings, and the deep desire of every human heart for all of creation because of sin is to find identity. We're looking for a sense of value and worth. And oftentimes what we do is we look outside of Jesus to find those things. We look to idols that we can worship. One of my favorite books is You Can Change by an author named Tim Chester. And in that book, Tim Chester says that there are 4 source idols that all of sin and all of humanity can be boiled down into. They tend to worship one of these or maybe multiple of these idols. And so he introduces them, and I want to talk to them a little bit because I think it's really helpful for us to understand in the area of intimacy, sex, and sexuality to think about it through the lens of these idols. And if we understand that every human heart is looking to one of these idols to give them a sense of significance, worth, and value, then when we talk about the issue of sex, sexuality, intimacy, it's helpful for us to understand how to assess our own hearts, but then also how to lead the people that are around us. So the 4 idols are this. Number 1, power. Number 2, approval. Number 3, control or security. And number 4, comfort. Now I want to break each one of these down a little bit, and then I'm going to give you some examples in the area of sex, how we can actually use sex as a tool to worship one of these idols. So picture it this way. We tend to worship one of, or maybe multiple of these idols, and then we use things in our life as tools to worship them. Sex being one of those things. Intimacy being one of those things. So I'm going to give you some examples, okay? So the first one is power. Power is a longing for influence or recognition. A longing for influence or recognition. So I'm a person, if I tend to worship the idol of power, who feels like I have more value and worth when I'm in positions of significance over other people. When I'm in those positions of power over others, I feel like my sense of identity is increased. So we see this a lot in the area of sex and sexuality, and one of the ways that we can see this is in pornography. One of the interesting things, if you look at trends in pornography, what you'll find is there has been this trend in pornography popularity towards violence and towards these power play scenarios within pornography. And this makes a lot of sense if you understand the human heart and idolatry, because when someone is consuming pornography, what are they doing? They are fantasizing about them being in the situation that they're watching. And so why is there a more tendency towards violent pornography? Well, I would argue it's because people who worship that power idol are using the fantasy of them being in that sexual situation as the thing that they're worshiping. They're using that as a tool to worship what their heart really wants, which is power. And this connection between worshiping that sense of power is connected with the biological sexual urges, right? And it all comes together and it feels satisfying to them in the moment. This is one of the reasons why pornography is so addictive, because we can imagine and fantasize ourselves being in these situations. Right? So for so many people, the reason why it's appealing is not just because they're turned on visually. The reason why it's appealing is because they're visualizing themselves being in positions of power, and that warms their heart because they think it gives them a sense of security. Another way we can see this idol at play is you can imagine a young woman who's in a physical relationship, right? And one of the things that they could do is, and this could be a man as well, but it tends to be oftentimes women, is they know that they could use sex as a tool to gain power over their partner. So if I'm in a relationship as a woman with a man and I know that they want sex, I have something they want, I have something they desire, and so I will use it as a way to manipulate, to get them to do what I want so that I feel like I'm in a position of power over them. I have what they need, I'm in control of that, and it gives me this sense of elevation or feeling of power. Right? And so what is happening in those moments, right? What is really the sin? What is really the struggle? I would argue it's not just the pornography, it's not just the inappropriate sexual relationship. What's really happened, the deep sin in your heart, is the worshiping of the idol of power outside of Jesus. So that's the idol of power. The second one we can look at is the idol of approval. And this is a longing to be accepted or desired. This is one of the most common idols, I think, in the human heart. Right? So this is easy to imagine in pornography. Again, I'm fantasizing of myself being in that situation. So you can imagine a young man who's watching porn, and what are they thinking? They're thinking, oh, these women want me the way that they seem to be wanting this person in this pornography, right? I'm imagining myself being in that situation. And in that fantasy world, it feels great to me that I am getting the approval of the opposite sex, that I'm getting the approval of the people that I want. And so much of the being turned on, so much of the physical stimulation that is happening is connected to that deep spiritual desire to have the approval of the people around us. Right? So that's one way this could flesh out. But another way it could look is, imagine a young woman who has the idea that, no, I want to have sexual purity until I get married, but then they meet someone, and what ends up happening is they feel pressure from their partner, from that man, to engage in sexual intimacy and sexual activity. And so now they have to choose between, do I give up the approval of this person to maintain my sexual standards, or do I lay down my sexual standards? Do I give up the purity that I thought was important, I wanted, in order to get the approval of the person? And oftentimes, that's what happens, right? We sacrifice our morality, of our sense of what is good and right for us, because our heart really wants something deeper. It's not the sex that we really wanted. What we really wanted was the approval and affirmation of the people around us. And this happens all the time in the human heart. So that's the approval idol. The next one is the idol of security or control. And this is the idea of a longing to have everything go according to my plan. So one of the ways that we see this manifested a lot of times is in the area of relationship, and particularly sometimes females struggle with this idol even more than males. And so imagine, again, being in a relationship and using your sexuality, using sex as a way of making sure that that person is attached to you. Maybe that person provides you a sense of security. Maybe that security is financially. Maybe you're living together in the same home, and there's a sense of safety and security that is provided. And in your mind, even subconscious, you realize, I'm giving this part of myself to this person. I'm engaging in this activity because what I'm getting in return is a sense of safety, a sense of security over my life. And what I think is, as long as I have that, I'll be happy. But another thing that's interesting, and this is more developing recently, is we're seeing the pornography trends in young people skyrocket. But one of the things we're seeing with young men, young boys, is traditionally you would have to put yourself out there in order to meet a female, right? In order to meet a woman, you got to put yourself out there and face potential rejection, as many of us did as young men. What we're finding now with pornography and young men and trends, because they are so afraid of rejection, and because they want to have oftentimes a sense of security and control in their life, it's easier to engage just simply in pornography and not try to engage in an actual relationship. Why? Because there's a sense of security or control that can come with that. I know what to expect. I know I don't have to fear being rejected. I have a sense of deep security and control over my life. I can just consume pornography and never feel the potential of being out of control. Right? So you can see that these idols play in our hearts in so many different ways. The last one I want to talk to you about is the idol of comfort. And I would say that in this younger generation, this is a primary idol that their hearts worship. And the way you define comfort is a longing for pleasure and an avoidance of pain. So we have a younger generation who more than ever desires to avoid pain or discomfort. And one of the ways that we see this fleshed out in the area of intimacy and sex and sexuality is pornography is an easy example, right? Why can people be addicted to porn for 10 hours a day? And why are people sex addicts, right? Well, part of the problem, part of the reason why that's the case is because when I don't want to have to think or deal or face or confront the issues and pain in my life, I can use sex and sexuality or pornography as an escape. In the same way that someone could use drugs or alcohol in a way to avoid the pain and the feelings that they're having, we can use sex and intimacy in the same exact way. We can use it to avoid that pain or that discomfort. And in the short term, while we're engaged in it, we forget about the issues and the problem. We're experiencing pleasure, and in our mind, that's the ultimate goal, right? But of course, we all know the problem is eventually that ends, and we are faced with even more the reality of that pain that still exists. So each one of these idols, whether it's power, security, control, comfort, or approval, are a part of our lives in some way. And what I would encourage you to do is to begin to think through which one of these idols is your primary source idol. Maybe it's a couple of them. For me, I can tell you right now, it's approval and then comfort. So which one of these is yours? And here's what I want to challenge you with as we close this video out. And in the next video, we're going to talk about a little bit more of the reality of the brokenness of our hearts, and eventually we'll talk about a solution. But in the meantime, here's my encouragement to you. For you as an individual, begin to think through your own life and ask yourself, what is my primary idol? What is the thing that I look to for value and significance? What's the thing that I worship outside of Jesus that I think will give me identity? And how does that idolatry connect to my own sexuality? So investigate your own heart, challenge your own heart to figure out your own source idol. But then the second thing I want to encourage you to do is as you begin to lead other people, start to use this kind of language, the language of idolatry. Help others to begin to examine their hearts and discover their idols.